Welcome to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast, where I empower you to develop sustainable habits, challenge society, and take messy action. I'm Christine, life balance coach and world champion ballroom dancer, and I believe that everyone has the power to create their very own life by design. The Recovering Perfectionist Podcast was created with a mission to encourage a life of abundance by finding peace and acceptance in our own imperfections and developing healthy self-love through sustainable habits and manifestation. It's time to align with the universe for the full human experience and redefine what it really means to be successful.
It's too good, the secret is out and wow.
Welcome back to another episode of the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast. I'm so excited for my guest today. Her name is Maggie Tatum, and she is an empowerment coach. And I'm so excited to kind of discuss her journey because she gets really real and we dig deep into the struggle and kind of watching people around you kind of figure it out, and you're still not figuring it out. And I think Maggie, her story is such a learning experience for so many. And at least for me, it was very nice to know that I wasn't alone, where I felt like everyone around me was figuring it out and I just wasn't, even though I felt like I was faking it till I make it kind of thing. And so hearing Maggie's story was extremely comforting and reassuring, knowing that it's okay. Like, you can not have it figured out and everyone around you can, or are getting there, and your time will come. So I want to introduce Maggie Tatum. Tell me a little bit more about you and kind of what you do and, what you want to share.
Yeah. So I really resonate with your recovering perfectionist message. I think that I grew up in the super conservative South, and my parents mercifully let me be who I was and let me wear what I want and believe what I want. They encouraged me to ask questions. They encouraged my weird, and they sort of celebrated my eccentricities, and I was allowed to be exactly who I was. Whereas I was seeing, all of my other peers being controlled by their parents and being told who they were supposed to be. And I'm getting chills thinking about it. And I was, living in this really supportive space where magic was real and my passions were things that you were meant to pursue. And the problem is that I was not connecting with people. I felt really alone and isolated because I was so different from everyone else in my community. My parents are, working class, and I live in a pretty affluent college town, and we didn't go to church. And so we, there were all these different things that told me I didn't fit in. And I got a lot of messaging and experiences that told me I didn't fit in. And it was, around the time that I hit puberty and I got nice titties and just blossomed into myself, that people really started paying attention to me. And but even before that, getting the messaging of knowing, writing stories about aliens, people think that you're weird. Writing stories about magic, it's not real. People think that you're weird. So from a very early age, I was these are the pieces of me that I need to chop off in order to find belonging. And especially when I started getting the kind of attention that I'd always been, that I thought that I was seeking, because I wanted any kind of attention. It wasn't the attention that I actually, that I desire now, but I was getting attention. And so at that point, any attention, good attention. So I, developed a lot of crazy ideas about what I needed to look like. And that's pretty much the beginning of my disordered eating. So I've been dealing with that for 15 years. And now I'm on the other side of it. But of course, even this past week, I've had a little trigger to that. And so, it's always things that we get to revisit with higher levels of consciousness. So I did that. And then like from basically, I was really great in school. That was another way that I got attention. So like my whole life I've just been like checking off boxes. I went to
Oh,
college,
that
graduated.
visual is so, like, I tell people that all the time. I'm like, checking boxes. Like, are
Exactly.
you checking your boxes? Are you checking society's boxes?
Who put those boxes there? Whose boxes
Yeah.
are
Whose
they?
boxes are they?
Exactly. Like, and because I say this too with my clients, like, because I also tell them you deserve to have your boxes checked, but whose boxes are they? Like, whose desires are they? And so I found myself at like 27 having done all of the things. Like, I have a master's degree, I was in a teaching career, I had a stable relationship, I was married, all of these things that I thought that I needed to do in order to graduate into society and be like happy and fulfilled. And I was fucking miserable. I had a drinking problem. I was like not eating and exercising compulsively. I then stopped that, gained 50 pounds in a matter of like 3 months. I like started taking anti-anxiety medication and antidepressants, and my life just like totally unraveled. And I had a moment where I was like, I done like I can remember being in the backseat of my mom's car, being like, when I was telling her that I was going to divorce my husband, that I've done everything that I thought I should do, and it wasn't enough. And that's like, that was my rock bottom. And I sort of like pretty much demolished everything in my life and started over. And
I like have chills, like just hearing
yeah,
that. Like, it's just crazy because I've heard I mean, if you're an avid podcast listener, you've heard time and time again on some of these mindfulness podcasts and, spirituality podcasts of people who just like that was it for them. They did everything right. They were the ultimate perfectionist. They checked every box and they thought that they were going to be happy. And when they got there, they were miserable. And I did the same thing. I got accepted into a college program that was like super prestigious, and I got to college and I was like, what is happening? Why am I unhappy? Why do I miss dancing? All of a sudden it showed me really what I wanted out of my life. And it wasn't what society had said was going to be the norm or recommended for a successful future or whatever. And I think that that's all relative, and it's all based on your perspective of how you define success and how you decide, again, what you desire. Like you said, are you checking your boxes or are you just checking society's boxes? And then you're going to end up doing a job till you're 65 and then enjoy your life and travel. Like, that's not reality anymore. It's just not.
No, and I think too, it's like this journey is so unique to you. I think one of the most painful parts about my experience was seeing like there were other women at my school who felt effective, who loved their jobs, who liked their simple life with their picket fence and their 2.5 kids. Like or at least it appeared to me.
I was going to say, like, I feel like Instagram is not just, it's seeped over into reality, because I feel like, that's been happening to me recently too, is that since I started shedding layers of my exterior perfectionist, everybody knows Christine is this utmost professional and always walks in looking great and doing this and doing 35,000 things. All of a sudden I started sharing with my inner circle, of friends, I'm working on my mental health right now. And they're like, oh, okay. Are you good? Like, do you need to talk about it? And then all of a sudden they started sharing things with me that I'm like, when did this happen? Like, how come this wasn't on the topic, on the table for conversation? And they're like, well, it just never came up. And it's like, everyone's going through it. And even my other friend was like, yeah, Christine, this, that we're all living in an Instagram world and everybody's got a facade but you're right. There are some people I think that are very happy with their lives the way that they are, as simple as they are. We see that as like, oh, I could never live a life that basic or whatever, and not to have judgment on it. But then it's not for me. But then you see someone that you think that they're happy, and then it's like, well, but they may not want your lifestyle, but they may just be unhappy in what they want. Maybe they could shift a couple things and they'd be happy. But I think everyone's going through something, and based on their perspective of their life.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I understand what you mean.
I think that like exactly what you're saying too is like, there are so many, I don't know. I think that there's this idea of like, at least I'm feeling in tune with this idea that we look at some people who have a secure home and a nice family and maybe a secure job, or maybe they're not working. And we think like, I don't know, I think that this comes like, it's some like work around like money mindset and things like that too. But it's like, they have everything. Why aren't they happy? Like, what do they have to complain about?
Right. They should be happy. Like, how dare they?
Like, fuck that. Like, I hate that narrative. It's like, you have no idea about the complexity of people's internal worlds.
Totally.
And this idea,
more money, more problems, right?
Exactly.
Is that what they say?
Especially if you believe that, and that's something that you've internalized. And like, we do this like comparative suffering as like, because they have more than me, they can't be going through something because my suffering is of this, like, especially when you're looking at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like, if I'm having trouble paying my bills, then this person's suffering is irrelevant because they have their bills met. But it's like, coming at it from a place of like utmost compassion, it's like I think everyone deserves to seek fulfillment.
Oh, totally. I was about to say, fulfillment is definitely the word that I think and I think that's the thing. I think as, we live especially in the United States, we live in a very consumerism mindset, but also community. And that's necessary in order for the United States to function the way that it does. We're not going to change that. We can't change that in the sense of, Nike, Google, Amazon. These are all things that thrive in this country because we're constantly putting the need and desire into people's heads that if you're not, wearing a Nike shoe, you don't, you're not enough, or everyone's wearing this or everyone's wearing that. Like, they need that desire to look good, feel good, whatever. And you've got people that branch off of that. They're like, I don't need all the materialistic things, whatever. But then we don't put any emphasis on what really makes you happy, where we should really put our money and invest in ourselves, in coaches, in learning, in podcasts, in whatever it is. I'm really curious about your time in Costa Rica because, for those listening, I feel like we're kind of almost doing like a podcast right now here. But for those listening, like, Kristen is my manifestation coach. I've been through both of her BAA and BMC programs, which were fantastic. And she talks a lot about, I've also had her roommate and best friend Halai on my podcast as well. And they both discuss the importance of finding a community of women they were able to connect with. And also where they were in Costa Rica, and it was a really terrible experience. Then they left, they found themselves, they did all of this work, and they went back, and they just got back. They were there for like 6 months. And it was a completely different experience for them to be able to share in this time and live in the moment and be. And I think that is something that we all crave and desire. What was your experience based off of that, since you were a part of that kind of like, feminine energy?
I mean, it was super paralleled. When I met Kristen. I think that she was doing the TEFL course down there, and I like crashed their graduation, and like I was so eager to have community that I like bought a bunch of booze and like found them on the beach the next day and was like, yes, sisterhood. But we sort of like spun out together. We were like drinking all the time and like partying. And I think that we were all very clearly, we had come there in search for something more, and we were not sure how to find it. And we were sort of using the old tools that we had for seeking connection,
right,
through drugs and alcohol. We had yet to like find the real tools that allow you to connect authentically. And so we all sort of spun out together, and they left and I stayed, and I really spun out after they left. And sort of like spent the last 3 years, 2.5 years in pretty intense isolation, doing like intensive, like hours and hours of work on myself a day.
What is that? Can I go into detail a little bit of what that work looks like? Because I think people talk about doing the work and we don't actually know what that work means or looks like.
It was exhausting. I mean, I completely came to terms with my responsibility, the responsibility I had over my life, shifting from all of this shit happened to me. I don't have any agency. I don't have any choice. I'm stuck, to I am responsible for all of this. And looking at the different, like diving into my deep, dark stories. And this is really hard as a perfectionist to like be like, all of this shit is like, there's a lot of shit going on in there that I am ashamed to admit that makes me imperfect. And I like really don't want to say there's like stuff wrong with me, that although I felt like that way at the beginning, I do not believe that now. I don't think that there are things that are wrong with us. I think that if we address ourselves as if we need fixing, that we are not able to love ourselves and come at ourselves with compassion. So, but it was, I mean, hours of shadow work, like digging into my limiting beliefs, the stories that created them, and rewriting them and doing it over and over and over again. I mean, journaling, like writing, honestly, sometimes for 4 hours a day, doing like reading intensively, like, I guess you call them self-help, but more like spiritual books. And like having long conversations with people, meditating, like running on the beach for hours, like just doing, I like dove into myself and I cracked myself wide open and sat in space with myself in a way that I have never done in pure presence. And it was hard. I mean, it was hard. It nearly, like that process nearly broke me because I was alone doing it too. Which is another reason that I'm so passionate about the work that I do in coaching, because like, fuck, I could have used a mirror. I could have used the guidance. I could have, like, I had to figure it all out on my own.
Right.
In the beginning, before I realized that I could ask for help. And it just took me a really long time. And I'm really grateful to have had, I mean, Costa Rica was the womb in which I like, you know, to use the Christian phrase, like was born again into like my true self. So I don't know. I mean, that kind of answers your question. It's hard to describe what exactly.
Oh, totally.
But,
I mean, it sounds like there's so many facets to what you're talking about. I love the concept of you saying just like the asking for help. I think that is one of the hardest things. And I need to find this meme again, but there was this graphic that was created that said, which one is the hardest one for you? And there's 4 sayings on it. One says, I love you, I trust you, I need you, and I apologize. And I immediately, like without even question, just straight went to, I need you. That's the hardest one for me, because now with my husband, it's different. Like he's gotten the most vulnerableness out of me. And it's because I want to give that to him because we are creating something together. I'm also really, really close with my brother. So my brother and I, like, I will call him and be like, listen, it's shit day. Like we got to talk, like this, you know, venting, like we just like almost preface the conversation. So you know what you're getting yourself into. But even like my parents or even friends, a lot of my friends look at me and see me as this achieving professional doing all these things. And sometimes when you're like having a shit day, you don't even know how to put that into words to say like, this is what I'm feeling. I feel like they're going to think I'm a fraud, or they're going to think like, I don't like, no, you're just kidding, right? That's not actually you. Because sometimes I hear myself say these things out loud and I'm like, I sound like a nutcase. Like, like that's not real. So, but my husband, I asked him, I said, which one is the hardest one for you to say? And he also agreed, I need you. So we're both very much on the same page there, which is funny because we are good with each other in that way. But when it comes to outside of us, like showing people our weaknesses or showing that we're not able, like we were the kind of people that as entrepreneurs, whatever someone needs, we'll figure out how to do it. Even if we don't know how to do it. We'll find someone, we'll independent contract them, and we'll figure out a way to make sure that the client gets what they need. Because we don't want to say that we can't do it.
Right.
And that perfectionist, again, that's why I created this podcast, because we created a podcast together, him and I, and he's a digital media genius, and we did all of this like visual podcast, and I did all of this editing and hours. I have a whole channel and all these mini clips from all the episodes, and it was professional grade. It was exhausting. Mm-hmm. I was like, I can't maintain this level of quality and put out an episode every week. There's no freaking way.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to start a new podcast, I was like, I'm just going to, morph that one into what I need. And I was like, no, I need a clean break. It needs to be something completely different. It's a completely different vibe, and it's going to be all vulnerable. And this is it. This is real. And I literally just take these audios and I pop them into my Audacity, and I put an intro and an outro, and I call it a day. And there's a lot of ums and a lot of this and that. And sometimes I'll crop out, the things that make sense. I try to make it, of course, because there's still a level that I want to maintain. But if something is not perfect, or if I didn't put out an episode last week, that's something that Kristen says all the time. She's like, I just wasn't called to it, so I didn't put one out. It's okay. Yeah. We skipped a week. Oh no, the world didn't end. Everything's okay. Yeah, it's just, it's profound to hear you talk about kind of that time where you just were ripping apart every layer. So you did the work. So were you there recently when they were back in Costa Rica for 6 months? Were you there?
Yep.
So talk about that time now.
I mean, it was really tough for me because I was moving. So I knew when I actually left while they were still there. And it was really hard. It was hard to leave this place had become a part of my identity. And I had to really work through why I was identified with this place. And I think it was because it was where I found myself, and it was such a safe place for me. And as a person who really struggled with anxiety, Costa Rica was safe. It was slow. I could be alone if I wanted to. There wasn't really bad weather. Everything was sort of the same every day. So I grew really accustomed to this consistency. And I was worried that when I came back to the States that I hadn't actually changed, that I had just found an environment that was suitable for me to sort of coddle me a little bit.
Wow, that's I have chills, just that's profound. Because I've had moments where I'm I just want to run away to Europe, and I feel like I'm going to find myself, and there's going to be this moment. But you're right. What if it's that environment that's creating that type of energy for you? And then when you go back to old environments, is it going to bring up and trigger and all of these things? That's huge.
It definitely, yeah. And I mean, there is something called it's astro geographic. I don't know what it's called, but it's basically there's certain places on the planet where you are based on your birth chart, where you are more supported, and where energy flows for you more. So I think that there is a certain component to that. And I was a little worried, but anyways, I think that I was worried that, I was going to regress, that I was using this place as that the reason I was able to get off my antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, the reason I wasn't having anxiety attacks anymore, well, other than stopping drinking caffeine and getting enough sleep, was I thought that I might be coming back into just a world of hurt. And so in that time, I decided to be intensely present. I met them for sunsets almost every day. I lapped up what I could of what it had to offer me. I wrote a lot of poetry, and I intensely manifested what I would be like when I got back. And so I would run through every day. I would run through what my day looked like when I was here. And I ran through my morning practice. I ran through my business practice. I ran through my relationship practice. I ran through every single thing. And I did this for 6 weeks. every single day, running through what my day would be like when I got back, because I needed to feel safe and supported in this transition. And I swear to you, every single day went exactly as I visualized it. I had already created this habit by simply visualizing it for 6 weeks before I got there.
That's it.
And so it was just like muscle memory when I finally got back. And so, I mean, during that time, it was even sort of hard to have them all back there because they had left and then everybody's coming back. And I'm like, now I'm leaving. And
what made you were already moving before okay. And you moved back to the United States, what state?
I'm in Alabama right now, but I'm moving to DC in a few weeks.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it was time. I felt like I'd reached a plateau, and I was aware that I was using this place as like, that I was relying on it for my safety. And so it was feeling too safe. And
it almost stopped your growth, essentially.
Yes, exactly. And I knew I had to make a jump. And I think that so often we stay in our current situations because we don't have a compelling enough future. For a while, I didn't have a fucking clue what my next move was going to be. I didn't want to move back to the States and not know what I was going to do and not know where I was going. And so I didn't make any plans to move back until I had an idea. And that, like, I think that's a huge piece that I work on with my clients. It's like, you don't change until your desire to change is greater than your desire to stay the same. And you don't change if you don't have a compelling future.
Say the other thing that you said, the first one, just louder for everyone in the back. You don't
change until your desire to change is greater than your desire to stay the same. And we get to choose. It's this choice we're constantly given between safety and security and freedom. And freedom is scary as hell because it is boundless.
Right.
It is outside the confines of like what we know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful. I love that. So now, now you have, again, we're always a work in progress. Progress not perfection is what I preach to myself and my clients every day. But you are working with clients. What do you specialize in? What is your, kind of thing that you discuss with people?
Empowerment and authenticity. As a person who has felt stuck, like I've backed myself into corners I can't get myself out of. And as a person who knows that when your future is compelling enough, you all of a sudden come up with a whole bunch of agency and the ability to like do the things you thought were impossible to do in a very short amount of time. That's what I instill in my clients. You have the power to create a life that you love. And I teach them to do this through loving themselves. If you don't first love yourself and accept yourself unconditionally, you're not going to think that you're worthy of having a life that you love. And that's just like, if you don't think that you're worthy, you can't manifest the things that you want to manifest if you don't think that you're worthy of them. Right. You cannot create what you want to create if you don't think that you're worthy of it. And you have to be able to not only hold the vision of what you want, but believe that you are deserving of it. Right. Believe it's possible and believe that you're worthy. And so I think all of that for me starts with self-love. There are so many parts of ourselves that we are told are not lovable, that we hold shame around. And if we don't address those pieces of us, like, we think that we're this like idea that we are not whole, that we're missing something, that we need something to like fill us up. And the truth is, like, we're whole. Oops, Deli. We're whole.
Yes, he agrees.
Yes, exactly. Fill me up. We are whole. There are just pieces of us that we deny. Yeah. There are pieces of us that we haven't invited to the table. And so I really, like, in describing what the kind of work I do is, like, there are all these people, and I was just talking to a friend, Fiona, about this, like, leaning away from the term like light worker, which you see a lot in this like sort of healing world, and like leaning into shadow worker. you don't get to enjoy the fullness of the light if you do not dance in the shadows. Looking at the things that are hard to look at about ourselves, and knowing that, like, and every time you do this, I'm getting chills because this is like the core of it. Every time you share something vulnerable that you once were afraid to share, you are like sending this message to yourself: I love you. This doesn't make you unlovable. You are still lovable, even though this. And that is like the way that we cultivate our self-worth. It's like every time we share something we've been ashamed of in the past, we are reclaiming that power and reclaiming ourselves. And so I do a lot of, like, I do talk and somatic work. I love breath work. It is super transformational. And I use all these tools together to allow people a safe place to explore themselves, knowing that they are like unconditionally loved by me. And, you know, sharing the ability of them for them to do that for themselves.
That's so powerful. I absolutely love that. It's so amazing to hear I love talking to other coaches and discussing their stories and their journeys and how they got to where they are today. Do you think it's necessary for coaches to have gone through, I don't know if I want to say traumatic experiences, but like, do you think it's necessary for them to have gone through certain transformations in order to be an effective coach?
I think that you can truly only coach people up into the level that you have dealt with your own shit. And I don't believe that you need to have experienced the same thing as somebody to be able to hold space for them. I do think that it's really, I mean, people coach all the time and don't do this, but it's, for me and from my perspective, you got to be in your own practice. You got to be doing this work too, in order to hold space for people effectively.
Right.
That's my perspective. And that's why I think that, like, you know, if I'm seeking a coach and they don't have a coach, I'm sort of like, like, how are you pursuing the depths of yourself? Like, surely you don't think that there's no more work to be done. And that's not really, like, you know, I want to work with somebody who understands that there are like always deeper levels, and who are in, like, for me, it's fun now to be curious. And like, even when I notice now that I like slip into like a lower vibration, instead of being like, fuck, I'm like, oh, what's happening here? Getting curious about it. And like, it's just all about being present in the process. So I don't think that you need like to have experienced capital T trauma in order to like, and have overcome that in order to be an effective coach. I think that honestly, we're learning now that tiny micro traumas that happen, especially as children, are as impactful as capital T traumas that we think about. And so I think all you need to do in order to be a good coach is be in the work.
Right. And to be curious. I like how you said that, is always be curious. You know, as an athlete, I was always understanding when my body was speaking to me, red flags, you know, you need this, you need more of this, whatever. And that keeps you kind of in the best performance shape that you can be. But the mental as well, we get so many red flags and signals and, you know, warnings that we ignore on a daily basis, that the curiosity of like, what does that mean? Or why does that, you know, like something hurts on your finger and we get curious, like, why is that hurting? And then, oh, if it's not too bad, we'll just ignore it. But it's like the same thing with your brain. Like if you're feeling triggered by something that someone said, you know, in society, we get kind of hit with the stereotypes of like, oh, don't be judgmental or give them the benefit of the doubt and all of that. So then we tend to just be like, oh, I'm just going to ignore it because it just popped into my head and it's probably just a judgmental thought. But maybe there is something underlying that's behind, that's thinking like, maybe there's something deeper you need to dive into there. And I think, you know, doing the work is hard. That's why I'm really glad that you explained kind of what doing the work looks like. I think that's really hard for people to understand. When I tell people sometimes like, well, they ask me what my program looks like. And I said, it's a 12-week program, and they don't imagine, like, some people think it's too short. And some
Mhm.
people think it's way too long. And it's
Mhm.
like, well, that's all based on your perspective of what
Mhm.
you feel healing is.
Mhm.
Um, you got to be, and I've had clients that start having changes week 2 and 3 because they're ready.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're syncing up with the universe, their energy and their frequency is aligned, and they're ready to go, and to receive everything the universe is going to give them. But then you have some people that like week 6 and 7 is when they start to get comfortable with you and open up. And then it just kind of like fires in every direction. So that's why I think 12 weeks is perfect, because it gives everyone an opportunity to find, it in their own time frame, because your journey is your journey, and it doesn't need to be faster or slower than anyone else's journey.
Yeah. That is like, that's hitting just
Yeah.
home. I mean, I feel like when we have these ideas about when am I going to be better? When is this not going to hurt anymore? And the truth
Yeah.
is, like, it never does. And if you're approaching healing with just wanting to feel better, you're going to be disappointed, because like in doing this work, you learn that like there are no bad feelings, that you get to
Right.
open up to the whole experience of it. And yeah, I think that we have these ideas about how long things should take, and there's some sort of finish line, and it's just like that doesn't exist. And when we remove that expectation, that's when like the real
Right.
stuff starts to shift.
Yeah, I mean, Kristen was the first coach that I worked with that allowed me to, it's okay, you can manifest from feeling bad as well.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the groundbreaking times, is when you dive deep into why you're feeling sad. And then because when you focus on, my dad introduced me to The Secret when I was 12 years old. So law of attraction, all of that stuff. And when you watch this video, you think about the concept of like, okay, well, I need to be happy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Or I need to be positive. So if something bad happens, it's like, okay, glass half full. But Kristen was the first person that was like, no, like, let's sit in that for a minute. Like, let's feel it. And let's actually feel the fear of what it is that we're scared of, or we're mad about, or we're agitated about. And then let's dig deep into that. And then let's heal it. And now we can move forward, versus just putting a Band-Aid over it and not dealing with it at all, because we need to be happy in order to manifest the things we want. There was this like complete mindset shift. But it's also allowing yourself to not sit in that too long, so that you don't get depressed or, hit a wall of no return. There's a really fine balance of that, but that's part of doing the work, the journaling, the getting it out, feeling the progress of when, you meditate on some of these things. And that's why I highly encourage, like you said, it's great that you're like, I don't want to work with a coach who doesn't have a coach. Like, everyone should be working with someone and constantly be growing and moving forward, because there's always something, even if it's just maintenance. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can't just anything that we have in life, it's like, okay, well, I'll clean the bathroom and I'll never have to clean it again. It's like, no,
Right.
it'll get dirty again. That would be amazing. Yeah, I'll brush my teeth 3 times today and I won't have to do it for the next 3 days. Like, no, it's not really how it works. You have to at least have, some level of maintenance, and then working towards a new goal, improving, up leveling, whatever it is, that you're working on. But sometimes it's just like enjoying the journey and just maintaining that level of being in tune with yourself and being curious. That's something I think that society is constantly trying to strip us of, or trying to numb us. I always say that society is very numbing. And I also came to the conclusion when I was like, oh, well, I don't, I love that you shared your experience. Thank you for doing that, by the way, with drugs, alcohol, all of that kind of stuff. Eating disorders. These are all things that we hear a lot of, sex, all of these things. Like, I wasn't numbing myself with any of those things. And so I was like, I'm good. And then I realized through a coach that I was numbing myself with work. That was my thing.
That's a big one.
It's a huge one. And I didn't even know that was one when, a couple of years ago.
Like, this is a good thing. how can it be
I'm
actually?
like, I'm going to be a millionaire because of this. I'm going to be I'm an entrepreneur. I'm hustling. I'm making things happen. I'm, motivated and driven. And how is this bad? But it became this thing that was aiding and just feeding my perfectionism that was just basically eating me alive. Like from the inside out, it was just bad all around. So so I mean, you said at the very beginning just how much you resonated with the concept of the recovering perfectionist, my podcast in general, just kind of some of the topics that we've hit on. What about the definition or the verbiage of recovering perfectionist is something that really hits home with you?
For me, I align perfectionism with this box checking, perfectionism with what other people expected of me, perfectionism as performative. And it is so intensely limiting. It is a cage that we put ourselves inside of. It kills creativity. It was like, in essence, it is the label that I put on my life before I found myself. And I think, like, even through school, like, just giving a quick example, like, I was more concerned in college about getting good grades than learning anything. I was more concerned with whether I was the hardest worker and worked the most hours over
What you were accomplishing.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
it stole life from me. I let it steal life from me. And in this recovery process, I've leaned into, especially like being, part of creating my business. I did a session with a dear friend of mine. She was like, it seems to me that you like created this community and this business so that you had a place to be fully authentic and share vulnerably. And that is in large part really true, because I've been, aching for that my whole life. And through this process, I've done some really messy shit and like just discovering myself. And again, every time I put myself out there in a way that isn't perfect, it is like a tiny little, like, I still love you. You're still lovable, like, message to myself. And it really is recovery. And it's constant, like with any recovery, I know from like, getting sober, from eating, I eat intuitively now, but I still have those old patterns. It's like recovery isn't linear, and it's always going to pop back up, these old, like, programs. And I just have the tools to confront them now. And it feels so empowering. And
I was going to say, it's the powerlessness that we have that I think a lot of people, when we say get coaches, do this, it's not because we're trying to sell you programs. It's not because we're trying to, work with us, all this stuff. It's like we're trying to help have you, sip the Kool-Aid. We were there. We know how it feels to be helpless and powerless and feel like there's no answers. I don't know how to take a step forward. And we have become the person we wish we had.
Yep.
And now we just want to spread that message everywhere and be like, you don't have to live like this.
God.
You just don't. And I literally have said that to people in clarity calls. I like literally just want to come through the screen to shake them and be like, you don't have to live like this. I resonate with everything these people say, and I know where you are. And I've sat in my bed crying, feeling this exact feeling, and you don't have to live this way. There are better ways and tools and techniques that you can use to help you through these times and just heal and become better on the other side. And so that's when we say, like, find a good coach. It's like finding a good nutrition plan. It's like finding a good, well, I don't love Western medicine, but finding a good primary care, or finding a good holistic worker, or whatever it is that you feel you need, finding a good daily vitamin, finding a good lighting for your desk, like find a good coach. It's like should be a staple in your life.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, we all, and going back to that thing, like the I need you, we all need support. We evolved to be social beings. We need connection. We need the mirrors. We rely on each other. And there is like, I can't tell you, I have a few clients who are just like, nobody knows that I'm working with you. I'm like, wow, that is wild. And sort of what you were sharing earlier too is like, when you started sharing vulnerably with your friends about things that were going on with you, it opened the space and held the space for them to share vulnerably with you. And it's like we go around thinking everybody's just got their shit together because they're not talking about these things, but that's just not the reality.
And it wasn't even hard for them. Like, it wasn't like, okay, you know what? You just shared something with me, so I'm going to share something with you. It wasn't like this disclaimer. They were just like, okay, so on to the next. Like, it was casual conversation that we could have had on any other Tuesday that we had lunch. And all of a sudden, the minute I opened the door, they were like, now everything became relevant. And it's almost like we're stopping all of these things from happening and these conversations from happening and just having what I call filler conversations. It's terrible. It's really the death of conversation, honestly, and the death of growth. Like, those are conversations I don't want to have and I don't encourage. And I immediately find the exit door from conversations like that. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Everyone's going through something, but that's interesting that you said about your clients, because I encourage my clients a lot of the times, because their schedules, they're these, mission-driven women that are doing a lot of things. So we're trying to slow them down and get them, focused on their well-being, their husbands, their kids, their friend circle, their PTA coworker moms, all the things they all need to be included, specifically the people that they're living with, in the nutrition changes, the mindset changes, the setting time aside for themselves. Like, dad needs to step up and start doing stuff with the kid more if mom's taking control of everything. Like, all of that needs to be communicated. So I encourage them to say, like, they know that you're working with someone, they know that you're going to be making changes, and they know they need to be supportive of you. And if you have, like, 9 times out of 10, they have a supportive spouse, like, they're all on board, and you just kind of like help the kids along to make them understand mommy needs time, that kind of thing. But other than that, it's like, if you don't express that you need this time or you need this support, again, the I need you, I feel like it keeps coming back to that, then how do you expect people to understand your boundaries? Right. And then that's an easy out. You're like, well, it's just not working because then they, our schedules aren't syncing up, and then I have to do this and I have to cover. And it's like, but you did not tell him that he needed to be there.
Yep.
So that's on you. Yep. Right. Share, just be, again, the vulnerability. That is so key. And we do not talk about that enough. Being vulnerable and finding fulfillment and all of that. It's not consumerism. It's not like why we work so hard to make money in the world. It's not because of, we're going to buy the fanciest cars and the biggest houses and all that stuff. At the end of the day, we just want people to share it with. Yeah. And we just want to live, peaceful lives. I think the less, the better. Have you ever read the book Essentialism? Mm-mm. Oh, so powerful. It's incredible. Highly recommended. I was just talking about it in another podcast. It's just the concept of like living an essential life. It's like to the next step of minimalism. Minimalism is more material things. Yep. And essentialism is more like just clearing all the clutter out of your head and just like what really matters. It's so powerful.
That sounds really appealing.
Yeah. I'll link it in the notes as well, just because I think a lot of people are wanting this book a lot, and I keep mentioning it. And I just want to make sure that people are able to find it.
Yeah, I mean, even just like resonating with that concept, like I know through this work, I know now like what is essentially what I need, what is essential in relationship.
Right.
I know what is essential in my work. I know what is essential in my practice. And I like have these unshakable standards that are allowed to evolve and are encouraged to evolve as I evolve, but standards nonetheless. where it's like you're talking about like surface level conversations. I don't do those anymore.
Well, right. No, totally. Oh, no, absolutely. I'm the same way. Like we never get into it because I just nip those at the knees,
Yep.
or I just sense them coming early on and I'm like, okay, well, I got to run, I'm right there with you. But
Yeah.
so many people, they feel comfortable in those conversations because they don't actually have to divulge real information about themselves. They don't have to tell you, like, it's so easy. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm good. How are you?
You're great.
That's such a natural,
Yep.
response to someone saying that, and you don't have to go any further than that unless they ask you how you're really doing or anything, and no one's going to pry.
Yep.
Unless you're with real people that want to know how you're really doing. Like, let's check in.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
that's like my need now. That is
Yeah.
my essential, like I need to
Mhm.
connect really with
Yeah.
people.
Right.
And I'm doing work on myself to arrange that outcome. We especially, I see this all the time in clients. It's like we want things in other people that we aren't doing ourselves.
Right. Totally.
And it really impacts our relationships, and you get to be who you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, totally. Absolutely. Wow. Well, listen, we kind of went about this all different than I was expecting. We just kind of jumped right into it. I feel like we've kind of known each other on social media for quite a while, and then just having, the Kristen and Halai connection and all of these different things has been really amazing. So it was so wonderful to virtually meet you face to face and just kind of get deep. I definitely I feel like we need a part 2 of this, and I definitely love, your energy, and just even talking to you is just great.
This has been wonderful. And I know as a gauge, I feel energized. I just went on a very slow run before this, and it's really hot outside. And I took my shower and I sat down and I was like, oh shit, energy levels low. But as soon as I got in front of you, it's like,
oh, thank you. That means a lot. That's awesome.
And I feel energized.
Yeah. And I think, here's the thing, I love having conversations, not just with other coaches, but just people in general that just want to have these soul-filling conversations, just about life and how we can move forward, and how we can do better and just create more impact in the world, but also within ourselves and with the people around us. And I think anytime we have conversations like that, our energy is just going to be completely lifted, because you're being fulfilled. So as much as we're putting out, we're getting so much more in return.
Yep.
And I feel that way. When I was teaching dance, same thing, because I loved it so much and it was feeding my soul. I could walk in having the worst day ever. I put everything at the door, and then I start dancing and I feel more energized afterwards than when I walked in with all that heavy stuff on me.
That's the magic.
It's magic. It's absolutely magic. So yeah, so I really, really appreciate, I feel exactly the same way. The energy has just been, electric. Mm-hmm. And so tell people, just because we'll put all the links obviously in the show notes, but just tell people kind of how they can reach you, and, what the next call to action if they want to work with you.
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. It's Maggie Tatum, MAGGIE TATUM. And yeah, I spend a lot of time on there. I challenge myself to show up super vulnerably, and I love engaging with community there, and I love connecting with coaches. I love connecting with women, men, gender nonconforming individuals. I love connecting with everyone. And I have clients from all over the world. And it's just been, like I was sharing before, I sort of created this space for me to have a space to be my authentic self. And I think that we're all hungry for permission to be our authentic selves. And so I sort of feel like I'm signing a daily permission slip to people who don't need permission slips, right? We don't actually need that. But so you can find me on Instagram. And if you would like to work with me, you can send me a DM and we will set up a time to chat. I do have space for a few new one-to-one clients coming up in the next few weeks. So I'm looking forward to, connecting with whoever's out
That's
there.
amazing. Yeah. And so for those of you who have seen my socials as well, like my 12-week program, Healthy Habits and Happiness, is opening up again for enrollment. So I have a few spots available as well. So like, there's really no excuse if you're listening to this podcast, you resonate with some of the things we've been saying, like jump on calls with either of us, because even if it's not us that can help you, we can guide you to someone who can. And it's the first step in your journey to finding more of your answers. I can probably speak for Maggie as well in saying that like her and I both had other coaches that led us to the ultimate coaches we've been working with. And we're still growing with new coaches all the time. So it's not the one size fits all. And it's not the, got a recommendation from this person, they're great and they work for me. It's like, no, if you hop on a clarity call and it doesn't feel right, that's okay. And nobody's going to fault you for that. You have to find the right energetic fit for you. And that could be one of us, and that could be someone that we know, but you got to get started, because there's just a lot out there that's guiding people in a certain direction. And if you never take the leap, what does it come back to that phrase you said earlier in the podcast? If your desire for change.
Yeah, until your desire to change is greater than your desire to stay the same.
Yeah, you will not do anything. So here's hoping that we kind of lit a fire in that desire to change for you, whatever that may be, whether it's really starting the deep work, or maybe you've done the deep work and you just need to up level in a different way, or you've got new goals. Like there's always room for growth. Yeah. So right. Here's hoping that has been, that you've shared that with us in the last 45 minutes here. You are fantastic, Maggie. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for listening to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast. I'm Christine, and if this episode resonated with you or spoke to you in any way, please feel free to share. I absolutely love hearing from you guys and your thoughts about the topics based on your experiences. And also, if there's anything you want me to talk about, just screenshot this episode and share it on social media with your comments. Your feedback really helps me to curate episodes that best serve you. If you have time, I would greatly appreciate if you could leave a review wherever you're listening to this episode, whether on Apple or Spotify or any other platform. I'm wishing you a blessed week ahead, and remember, perfection doesn't exist. Take messy action. Healthy habits keep us balanced, and you are enough.